Hey guys, I'm John Setzler. Welcome back to Man Cave Meals for another installment in our bread series. Today I'm going to teach you how to make sourdough bread. This is a very basic yet very delicious loaf of sourdough, so let's get started. I'm going to start mixing my dough in a dough tub that I use. I just have this rectangular dough tub, and I've got sourdough starter here that I fed about 14 hours ago. So this starter is nice and active, and I want to start out with 140 grams of this starter. So I'm going to spoon that much out into my tub. It comes with 142 grams, which is fine for our purposes. Then I'm going to zero my scale, and I'm going to add 240 grams of room temperature water. Okay, then I'm going to take my little mixer here, and I'm going to mix that up. Okay, I'm going to tweak this recipe a little bit. Instead of 240, I'm going to add 255, so I'm going to add an additional 15 grams of water. In the following, I'm going to add 400 grams of bread flour. And if you're not using bread flour, you can feel free to use all-purpose flour here. And the reason I added the extra water is because I want a 70% hydration dough here. And I'll talk about that in the video description. You're going to want to have a look at that also. And the next thing I'm going to do is, after I've added this flour, is I'm just going to mix it and get the flour and water all completely combined here. Once I have that mostly mixed, I'm going to wet my hand, and I'm just going to get in here with my hand and make sure I have most of that combined and get most of this dry flour up. And once I have that combined, I'm just going to flatten that out with my hand just like that. Then we're going to put a lid on this and let it sit for 90 minutes before we touch it again. After our first 90 minutes has gone by, I'm going to open the container back, and I'm going to wet my hands again, and I'm just going to come in here and press this dough out flat. And the next thing we're going to do is add our salt. I've got 9 grams of salt here. I'm using Diamond Crystal kosher salt. I'm going to put about half of that in here, and then I'm going to get up under this dough, and I'm going to pull it and stretch it and fold it over itself, and I'm going to rotate the container and do the same thing from the opposite direction. And then I'll just pick my dough up. This sticks to the bottom of the container just a little bit, but only in the beginning, and turn that dough, and then we're going to pull it and stretch it from the other direction as well. Then I'm going to take the dough, flip it, and I'm going to flatten it back out. It helps to keep your hands kind of wet during this process. And I'm going to sprinkle on the rest of our salt, and I'm just going to kind of press that in there. And then I'm going to stretch and fold that dough another time. We just want to get that salt incorporated into the dough during this step, and a couple of stretches and folds make that happen quite nicely. So we're going to take this, after we've done that, flatten it, just press it, flatten it back out again as best you can, and then we're going to put the lid back on that, and it's going to sit here for another 90 minutes. We've been another 90 minutes, so I'm going to pop the lid. You can see how that dough's spread out there, and I'm going to wet my hands again. This is something you're going to want to do every time you handle this dough, is just wet your hands. But we're going to do another stretch and fold. So what I'm going to do is get up under this dough from this side, and we're going to pull it out just like that, fold it over itself. I'm going to spin my container around, and we'll stretch it again. and fold it over. Then we'll turn it the other direction, pull it, stretch it, fold it over, and do the same thing. Once again, you can feel the dough stiffen up as we do this because that gluten network is starting to build. I'm going to flip it over, and then I'm just going to flatten it out again. We flatten it out to help keep the temperature fairly even in this dough. So I'm going to cover that back up, and we're going to go for another 60 minutes from this point before we come back. We've been another hour, so it's time to do another stretch and fold on our dough. It's looking pretty good. So I've wet my hands. I'm going to pull it, fold it over, do the same thing from the opposite side. Just pull it, fold it over, then we'll rotate it, pull it this way, and fold it over, and do the same thing once again. This dough is definitely tightening up. You can feel it. It starts to hold its shape better and better as we stretch and fold it. So I want to start having a look at this and see, how well our gluten's forming. It's still not quite where I'd like it to be yet. So we're going to let this go the final hour, and at the end of this hour, we'll look at that dough one more time and see if it's ready. If it's ready, we'll move forward. If it's not, we'll stretch it and fold it again and let it go for another hour. I'm at the end of my next hour here, so we're going to have a look at this dough. Let me wet my hands just a little bit here, and I want to try to pull a window here and see what my gluten network looks like. That looks really good. It's still tearing just a little bit, so I think I'm going to give this guy one more stretch and fold. So I'm going to pull it and pull it from the other end and fold it back over, just like we've been doing. I'll give it a rotation, pull it the other direction, fold it over, and once more from the other way. We'll flip it, and I'm going to flatten it back out and let this sit for another hour. I know at the end of that next hour we're going to be ready to go because that looks almost right. So I'll cover it back up. We'll be back in another hour to move on to the next step. We've gone for another hour here, so I want to have a final look at this. I'm sure this guy's ready to go, but I want to double check. We're going to pull up. Well, it still tears just a little bit, but I think we're good. So I'm going to lightly flour my working surface here, and we're going to roll this bread dough out of our container, and we are going to shape this. And what I want to do to shape this into a bowl is just kind of spread it out a little bit, and I want to pull from the edges towards the center. Just like that. And then we're going to flip this guy over, and I want to kind of use my work surface here to pull it toward me. I'm going to flour my hands a little bit more. And get that guy shaped up into a nice round bowl. And then I'm going to just lightly dust the top of that with some flour. And we're going to do now what's called the bench rest. I'm just going to cover this guy with my flour sack towel and let it sit for 30 minutes. Our bench rest is finished. We've been going here for 30 minutes, so I'm going to uncover that, and you can see what we have there. It's flattened out a little bit, but not a whole lot, which means our gluten's holding together. Our gluten structure's pretty decent in this particular loaf. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do our final shaping, and we're going to put it in a banneton. And this is a banneton. It is a basket that's made out of this, I don't know what you call that, rattan, or it's like wicker, sort of. And to prepare this basket, I've sprayed it with water, and I've dusted it with my dusting flour. And the dusting flour that I use is a 50-50 mixture of semolina flour and rice flour. And the reason you use that is because we don't want this to stick in there. This is not an incredibly wet dough, but it is 70% hydration, which is more than enough to stick if you don't have that prepared properly. Now, if you don't have a banneton, you can use any bowl. You can find a bowl that's this shape. This is 9 inches or so, 9 or 10 inches across the top, and it's about 4 inches deep. And you can use a different kind of bowl, and I'll show you how to do that. You can do that by using one of these towels in the bowl. So enough with that. I'm going to flour my hands again right quick, and I'm going to get up under this. I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to pull it again like we did before, from the outside to the middle. And we're just doing a shaping here. Is what you call shaping a loaf. And then we'll flip it back over, and I kind of like to push under and pull it and turn it. Our objective here is to form a tight skin across the top, and this looks pretty good. So what we do at this point is we take that and we flip it into our banneton, just like that. And I'm going to take a little bit more of my dusting flour and put around the edges here and on that surface of that loaf. And then we just cover this guy back up with the tea towel, and this is going to rise for another 1 to 2 hours in that basket. You have another option at this point. If you want to cold ferment for the final proof, what you would want to do is put this banneton, instead of just covering it with a tea towel, you'd want to put it in a plastic bag, like a produce bag from the grocery store or something, and tie it off and put that in the refrigerator. And you can throw this guy in the refrigerator overnight or for 24 hours and let this final couple hours of proofing go as a cold proof, and let it go slow, which can help you develop some even greater flavor profile in this bread. But I'm going to cook today instead of doing that. If you want a cold proof, you just need to take this out of the refrigerator about an hour or 90 minutes before you're ready to cook. But we're going to cook today, so I am going to cover this up. And while we're going through the final proof here, I want to show you how I set my oven up to cook a loaf of bread like this. I put my oven rack in slightly below the middle level, and I use my baking stone. This is a Pizza Craft baking stone. It's a large rectangular one that I use. You can use a regular pizza stone here. You don't have to have something like this, but you do want it down at this level. And you're going to want some heavy-duty oven mitts for this, because we're working with some stuff that's going to get extremely hot. So you're going to want to pull, when you're ready to load your bread into the oven, you're going to want to pull the stone out about like that on its rack. We're going to use a pizza peel to launch our dough right onto the stone, and then for the first part of the cook, we are going to put a stainless steel mixing bowl over the top of it, which helps keep the steam in, and we'll push that right back in there like that, and we'll let it cook for the first 15 to 20 minutes, 15 minutes or so with that on it. And at the 15-minute mark, we'll come back in, and all we'll do then is yank this off and let it continue to cook uncovered for the remaining 15 minutes or so that it takes to cook this loaf. I will start preheating this oven about an hour before we're ready to cook, because it's really important to get this stone completely preheated, not just at the surface but all the way through. That's going to help the bread tremendously. And I also preheat that as well. So we'll be back. We won't look at this again, but we'll be back again when we're ready to start preparing the loaf to go in the oven. We've been on our final proof here for about an hour, and I want to kind of show you what's going on here with the dough. It's kind of hard to tell how much it actually has risen since we put it in here, but it's rising. And I want to give you an idea kind of what you're looking for to tell when this proof is done. You want to take your finger and kind of dust it in a little bit of flour and push down into the dough. And you can see how quickly that rises back when I press that in. That's a good sign, but that's also telling us that our proof is not quite done. We want to be able to make an indentation in the dough like that, and it be much slower than that coming back up. There's no real recipe for this. You just kind of have to watch it and get a feel for it. This side, when it comes up very quickly like that, we're underproofed. If you get to the point where you poke a dent in it and it doesn't come back at all, at that stage you are overproofed. So it just takes a little hands-on practice to learn when this stuff's good to go. We're at about 90 minutes on our bulk proof now, and I think this guy's just about ready. So we're gonna do the poke test there, and see, that's coming up, but it's coming up a lot slower than we were before. I'm probably going to give this maybe 10 more minutes, and I'll bring you back, and then we're going to be ready to put this in the oven. Okay, I'm ready to put this guy in the oven, but what I want to do first is transfer it to a pizza peel. So what I'm going to do is sprinkle on some more of my dusting flour up here on this, because I don't want it to stick to my peel, and just by adding some of that dusting flour there, that'll solve that problem right away. And my favorite way to flip this out onto a pizza peel is to take my peel, we're going to pick the banneton up, put my peel over the top of it, flip it over just like that, and then lift the banneton off, and it comes off very easily. Some people like to dust the flour off of there. Having that flour on there gives it kind of a rustic look, but if you don't like that, you can take just a basting brush or whatever and kind of brush that excess flour off. It's totally up to you. You can do it either way. And what I want to do next is take a really sharp knife, and I am going to score about 1/4 of an inch deep all the way across the surface. If you want to do an X, you can feel free to do that. The next thing I'm going to do is mist the top of that with some water, and now we'll go to the oven. First thing I want to do is open up the oven. We're going to slide this out. I'm going to move my mixing bowl out of the way. I'm going to slide my bread bowl right onto the stone just like that. Flip that. Cover it up. Back in. And we'll be back in 15 minutes. We've been going 15 minutes, so it's time to take the dome bowl off, and we should see a rather impressive amount of oven spring here. Look at that. So we're going to put that back in and let it finish for another 15 to 20 minutes. And after another 15 minutes, we're done. This thing looks amazing, so I'm going to yank that out. I don't know how well you can see that right here. I'm going to pull it up in the light and we'll have another look at it. This thing looks beautiful, and I'm going to move my microphone up here where you can hear it sing. I hope you can hear that crackling noise this bread makes when it comes out of the oven. That's just amazing. So what we have to do from here is let this guy cool. One thing you don't want to do is cut into one of these before it's cooled. I've let this loaf cool for about an hour now, and we're going to go ahead and slice this guy open. I'm going to come right down the middle here, and let's have a look inside. It smells amazing. I wish you could smell that aspect of it, but video doesn't do us much justice in that arena. So you can have a look at that and get an idea. It has a beautiful crumb, a beautiful nice open crumb there. One of the things about the open crumb is when you use higher hydration loaves, you get a little bit more of that. This one's at 70, and if you'll look at my notes in the video description, I've talked a little bit about doing this with different hydrations. So we're going to leave that at this. This is how you make a basic sourdough loaf, and these loaves are delicious. I've made this one many times. So until next time, this is John Setzler with Man Cave Meals.